Welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm your host today, Bill Hirschman. I'm editor-in-chief critic of FloridaTheaterOnstage.com. And our topic today is close to my heart. It's all about how criticism and reviews affect South Florida theater. And I have our usual guest of miscreants and experts here on the panel. We start with Iris Acker, noted actress and producer. We have Renaissance man Michael McKeever, the playwright, director, actor, designer, and takeout delivery man. And finally, we have Karen Stevens, one of our great actresses down here in South Florida. But we're especially honored today to have as our special guest to speak about criticism, the dean of criticism here in South Florida, the Miami Herald's veteran theater critic, the wonderful Christine Dolan. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I want to start off and ask, in this world of blogs and tweets and having virtually anyone with access to the internet giving their opinion about theater, why does professional trained theater criticism matter today?
Well, I hope that it still does. I'd like to think that it still does. I think it's true that we all have opinions. Some people are very good at expressing them, others not so good. And it's true also with the kind of the shrinking of the voices that we're used to from traditional media, that there's a lot more criticism being posted online. Mm-hmm. I'm not, your blog, for example, is a professional vetted blog. There are other blogs that are not. So anybody who's looking to go to the theater can certainly find lots of opinions to consider before making that ticket purchase. But those of us who have done this for a living for such a long time, yourself and myself, for example, we've spent our lives considering theater, learning about theater, writing about theater. I'm sure that we both have seen, I don't even know how to add up all the productions that I've seen in my career because it's a long one, but 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 productions probably. And hopefully that gives you a kind of basis to work from when you're considering a new play, a traditional musical, whatever it is that you're analyzing. And you have this solid foundation from which you can form your opinions. So I do think that professional criticism is of value, that we're not just trying to get hits to our website, make the theaters happy, make the artists happy. I think that we're trying to write for the theater-going public and people who feel passionate about theater as we do.
Well, in fact, I always wanted to know, do you do any preparation before? Do you research?
It depends on what it is that I'm reviewing. For example, just this past weekend, when we're recording this, I saw Sons of the Prophet at Gable Stage. That was not a play that I had seen in New York, and I could have just walked into it cold, but I don't think that that's serving the readership, which is my primary audience, or the artists, or the playwright. I don't think that's fair. So I read the script, although sometimes, as in this case, I stop before I get to the end because I like to experience the end of a play on stage, because that's how it's meant to be experienced. I read about the playwright. I read a few reviews of other productions of the show so that I knew what it was I was walking in to see. And if I'm writing about something that's never been produced before, particularly if I'm writing a feature story in advance, I probably will read the script. I'll do an interview with the playwright, as I have with Michael here many times. I think one can never be too prepared. Even though what you're trying to do is give a reaction the same way you would as if you were a highly educated audience member, I think out of respect to the artists and out of a desire to do the best job you can do, that prep is really important.
Good to know.
What do you, some people have different expectations. What do you think your role is in the first place as a reviewer slash critic slash arts journalist in general? What is it that you think? What are you trying to accomplish? Who are you working for? What's your role?
I think that I'm doing many things. I think that I am first and foremost trying to serve those who are considering going to the theater. Sometimes I'm even trying to write such an interesting review that people who aren't even thinking about going to a certain production at least read about it and know that it's going on, and perhaps a review will change their minds about spending the money and spending the time to go out and see theater. I think that we as journalists are chroniclers of the ongoing history of a theater community. And I know I've been doing this since 1979. That's a long time. I've seen many companies come and go. I've seen many artists come and go. So I am excited when I walk into a production to see, okay, this actor who I've seen in 10 other productions is going to do this with this part. So it's a multi-layered role that I feel that we play. I don't, despite the fact that we are offering subjective, hopefully well-informed opinions about the art that we see, I don't think of myself as passing judgment on the work of artists. I appreciate what they do. I try to capture the essence of their intention and perhaps comment on whether it was successful or not, in my opinion, but always given enough information that anybody reading a review can make up his mind or her mind about going to see something on stage.
Do you feel that some people who are civilians sometimes wonder whether we have in the back of our minds trying to help the theatrical community thrive and survive? I know that there have been new companies where the artistic director has somewhat expected that we are going to write a positive review, or in some cases a negative review, depending on how they think we want the theatrical community as a whole. So how do you see your role within or outside or alongside the theatrical community? What's your role in developing a world of theater in South Florida?
Well, my bottom line is that I am as interested in anybody as anyone else who loves theater in seeing theater thrive. But I'm doing nobody any favors if I see a production that's obviously flawed or misguided or unsuccessful and pulling my punches, pulling back on my commentary because I don't want to hurt a new theater company. Theater companies deserve to succeed on the basis of their art. And you know, there are many ways to say the same thing. One can be cruel, one can be observant, one can be supportive. And all of this, of course, goes through your mind when you're sitting down to write a review. But again, bottom line is that I'm not serving myself, my publication, or the potential theater goer if I say something is really promising or really good when it isn't.
Sure, I'm sure that just discounts your own reputation if you give a good review to something that's obviously not good for the sake of the theater.
Absolutely, and people will write to you and say, did we see the same show?
Exactly, what were you thinking?
Right, what were you thinking? And you know, maybe we didn't see the same show because we're both coming from different perspectives.
Sure, sure.
But I think honesty is paramount.
I think it's incredibly important. You said earlier that, as you pointed out, you've been doing this since 1979. How has?
When I was a child.
Yeah, exactly. Well, obviously you started when you were just 8, so good girl. That being said, how has the South Florida theater community evolved? How have you seen it change? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? I mean, have there been peaks and valleys? How has it evolved?
I think that it's getting better, with an asterisk.
Okay.
But when I began, there weren't very many South Florida theater companies. Ruth Foreman had a very important theater. Players State Theater was functioning at the Coconut Grove Playhouse. There was touring Broadway, but there just really was, and the Caldwell actually came along 37 years ago or something like that. But there weren't so many South Florida-based companies. And the great news is that over the years I've been writing about theater, more and more companies of all sizes have joined the South Florida theater community. That has provided an environment where playwrights like yourself, actors like Karen, can work, which is fabulous. I mean, you can make a life in the theater here in South Florida, which at the time I started, it was very, very hard to do. Right. Now, that said, as you know, and everyone knows, we've lost some very important companies in the last 7 years, starting with the Coconut Grove Playhouse, Florida Stage, Promethean Theater, Mosaic Theater, and the Caldwell, which happily has just reopened as the Wick Theater, a place where one can go and see wonderful productions of classic musicals. And I do worry, because I think that our theatrical ecology is fragile, always fragile. And I know that the artists here often have to do many different kinds of jobs in order to continue working in the theater. We've also lost Burn Notice and some of the television shows that employed some of our great theater artists here, and that's a loss. But I guess I'm an optimist. So.
Oh, it's good. And as you said, what happens as we lose theaters, as we lose television production, just by nature of losing those venues, we lose actors, we lose directors. People start going to other communities.
Right, which makes me weep. You know, I see so many talented young artists graduating from our schools here, including New World School of the Arts, and many of them do stay here for a few years, but that many of them have decided to just hop right on up to New York and go through the rounds of auditions that every actor has to go through. And I wish they would stay here and create opportunities for themselves, and therefore create exciting theater art that we can all experience.
Karen, as a working actress, I know you have a question for Christine. You read your reviews?
Yes.
And you work a lot. What do you have to say to Christine?
Yes, I'm one of those people who read reviews. I don't work as much as I'd like to. You know, as you know, as a person of color in the theater, there aren't as many opportunities, and female. But I do work a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for Christine for always giving me a favor.
That's because Karen's awesome. What can I say?
Do you read your reviews before, during, or after the run?
Oh, well, I wish I could say I was disciplined enough to wait until after the run, but no, I want to know.
Then does it inform what you do later in the run, or do you allow it to affect
Good
you?
question.
Well, like I said, I've been fortunate enough to receive favorable reviews. There have been times when I've received reviews that were lukewarm. She was good, but she could work on this, you know, that kind of thing. Or, as an actor, I have to maintain the integrity of my choices based on the process that, you know, rehearsal, the choices that I made as an actor, as a professional. I'm kind of anal in my process, and that I keep working toward the definitive expression of that character. And when I hit it, it's like gold. It's like butter.
I want to ask you something similar. I mean, does a review or criticism matter? I mean, have you not frozen the show opening night for all intents and purposes, or does a show change depending on certain amounts of criticism, particularly if numerous critics agree on a certain aspect of what you've seen?
Only if the director says, you know, there's a point there. And I think maybe you should soften this.
But can you do anything about it?
I don't think it's the actors.
But can you do anything about it?
What's happened in my case, and that has happened in several, because when you're dealing with world premieres, you know, that first production, you're still learning. You're learning what's working with the audience. You're learning, and in the case of critics that you respect, you read those reviews, and if you get 3 really top critics giving the same review or the same criticism about something, you need to take note. You do. What I will do, though, is in that situation is it's not fair to the actors to say, because the scene obviously isn't working, we're going to rewrite it and give you a new scene halfway through the run. You just can't do that. But what will happen as soon as that production's done, that scene gets rewritten and put into and adjusted or fixed for the next production, because you know it simply isn't working. That's happened to me more than once, where the second production that's gone up has been impacted by the reviews, because there's been enough of them all hitting the same point.
Yeah. That makes sense. They're all, but I mean, when they're not, there was a review that was written recently. You didn't write it. I don't know if you've seen the show. But what happened was praise for everyone in the show except one person, and that person has to go away with a bad review where everybody else got good ones. And now I know we go back a long way, Christine. And you took a year off, and you studied.
I did.
And you performed, and you told me you weren't good. Is that correct?
Well, I'm too self-conscious to be a performer.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I never thought of it from that point of view. But do you take that actor, the actor, do you do that? You all do that. You take one actor possibly who wasn't good where everybody else was, and it can destroy that actor. You have actually almost, and it just so happened with a very well-known actor down here who in New York was destroyed by, what's his name, Simon?
John Simon.
John Simon wrote a review on him that was so bad that he retired from the world of theater and started teaching for many years, maybe 15 years.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Afterwards, I'll tell you the actor's name.
We know.
And he came back here and has had a lovely career here. You know, he got over it. It took all that time.
But I think as performers, as actors, we need to develop a tougher skin, because it's part of the job. I mean, if you're going to do something, not everyone's going to like it. It's just part of what we do.
Michael,
and I think it's
easy enough said. I've learned to do that, believe me, because I haven't always gotten great reviews. But I'm just saying, somebody who's young at this point, very vulnerable.
It's also a two-way street.
Do you take any of that into consideration?
Yes and no. I mean, as I said before, there are many ways to say something. One can be cruel and eviscerate a performer.
Yes.
But I think sometimes that's the critic trying to show how clever he or she is.
Oh.
There are ways to offer constructive criticism. If there's a cast in which everybody is just incredible, and there's one person that's really undermining the production, you have to find a way to say that without destroying somebody. And it's unfortunate that critic did what he or she did. But as Michael said, this is a tough business, and honestly, I wouldn't want to be an actor having my work dissected all the time. But this is the structure of the theater world, and there's a lot of good that can accrue to companies and actors and playwrights from reviews. So I don't think many of them would want to eliminate the critic altogether.
Well, I agree. I think that's really essential.
I was also going to say that it's a two-way street, and I can't speak for all critics because we're as different as anyone else. But I often get calls that say, "Listen, I'd like to react to the review that you wrote, but I don't know whether I should, whether it's right, whether it's normal." I figure that if we dish it out, we ought to be able to take criticism back from our readers, from the people that we're reviewing. If someone says, "I think you didn't get what we were doing, and that was your shortcoming, not ours," that's fine. I should be able to take it. I should also point out that as journalists, we get critiqued ourselves every single day by our editors, who second guess and edit.
How true.
You know, I mean, it's not like we don't understand what it's like to put your guts out on the stage and have it stomped all over. I mean, this happens on a weekly basis, so there is some understanding. But I am curious, and I hear a lot of actors say, I never read reviews, which I think is amazingly short-sighted, because they'll listen to what the doorman at the front will say and listen to them and go, that moment didn't land. But if a critic says it, apparently they don't want to hear it. And I've heard all the reasons, but I think the audience ought to hear, why is it that so many theater professionals don't want to read reviews, at least during the run?
Why not?
I could tell you why. The people that I know, I don't. I'm one of those people that back in the day when, before the internet, I used to wake up at 4 o'clock and go and see if the paper had been delivered yet. That's what I used to do. Now I just go online at 4 o'clock in the morning. But in the case of friends of mine, because I do know several people who won't read reviews now, it's simply because they don't want, they're afraid the review, good, bad, or otherwise, will somehow impact that performance. And even if they try not to, it still will. So as a result, they won't look at it till afterwards.
And I think that's a perfectly valid point of view.
Yeah, I do too. But not that I can do that. I have to read it.
There's also, I think, the belief that it's just another person's opinion. You know, like you said, it's a subjective opinion by, you know, another human being.
But hundreds are reading that opinion.
Exactly, and that was part of the question that I had, but that Bill touched on before, as to whether the critic feels any responsibility to get butts in the seat, you know, for the theater. So sometimes an unfavorable review will cause people not to go, but along the other lines is that, you know, with this being a tough business and having to have a thick skin, we have to remember that it is just another human being. Even though a critic is in the position of reviewing a show and giving his or her professional opinion about it, that it is just another human being giving an opinion. It's not going to make or break me. It's not going to cause me to go slit my wrists. I might be depressed about it. I might be unhappy about it. I've always wondered if it's okay, like you said, to write a critic and go, what? Why did you say that?
There's a great website called stagegrade.com, and it takes every review of every New York production and runs a little blurb from each, and unfortunately puts a letter grade on it. But it's fascinating to see how any one production can get a dozen completely different viewpoints, or viewpoints that focus on a completely different aspect. And it's very humbling, and it's very good for critics to look at this and go, you know, there are other intelligent people who have highly intelligent opinions about what's going on. And I think it reinforces the fact that most critics think that, yeah, we think we're very intelligent, we have very good insight, and we're more trained as observers than many other people, but it's just our opinion, and it's literally only our opinion. And I don't know many critics who claim to be the be-all and end-all of, well, you know, if I feel this way, that's the end of it.
Well, along the same lines of that, a quick question. When you are about to step into a theater, and you're going to be giving a review, or you're going to be writing a review on it, what is your mindset? How do you step through those doors, and where do you put yourself when you're about to see a brand new production?
I like to walk into a theater with a feeling of anticipation and excitement, feeling prepared, feeling observant, and feeling ready to have a good experience. And then what follows is what follows.
Right.
And I'll react to what actually happens on the stage. But truly, I have been doing this for many, many, many years. I am as interested, excited, and engaged in writing about theater as I have always been. I mean, I do have a dream job, and I and grateful for it every day. I hope to keep doing it for many years to come. And we do take what Bill and I do, we take it very seriously. We know that it's a responsibility. So we don't abuse it. We express our honest opinions as best we can. But every time I walk through the doors of a theater, it's magic time.
I like that.
Nice.
And you have the passion, just as we actors do, for performing. That's wonderful. The word I like is passion.
One thing that's interesting in South Florida, you asked how things have changed. One of the things that's clearly occurred in the last 10 years, and thanks to Florida Stage and many others, is a real uptick in the amount of new work that's being done. And I want to ask you, how do you look at new work? How do you do your job differently, if at all, when you're looking at a new piece that nobody's ever seen? What do you try to do when you're doing that?
Well, I do often read at least part of the script, so I get an idea of what the play's about and what the playwright's voice is. If it's a playwright whose work I've seen before, I'll revisit some of that other work. But then you get down to analyzing it the way you do any other play. New works, as Michael mentioned, often have flaws here and there because it's brand new out of the oven art, and it's still in process. So sometimes things you say will be more impactful than if you're reviewing Death of a Salesman again. But I love nothing more than to discover a great new play.
And that's a wonderful way to start wrapping things up. I want to thank you all for coming to Spotlight on the Arts. We'll be here next week. I want to thank all of our guests, especially Christine Dolan, and we encourage you to go to the theater as much as possible. And if you're wondering what is playing this week, next week, or in the future, you can see a calendar on FloridaTheaterOnStage.com. Thank you.